Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Chris Hale. I'm the CEO of Victory and a veteran of our United States Navy. I would like to welcome you to the GI Jobs Virtual Career Expo. I am broadcasting today from the Student Veterans Lounge on the beautiful campus of Garrett College in Western Maryland. Let me show you what I saw when I arrived. Plenty of dog-eared copies of GI Jobs magazine right behind me here, folks, in the student lounge. We've got a great student lounge here. If you're a veteran and you're looking to come to a college and study some really cool stuff, this is what you're going to have access to. They really take care of their veterans here, and they've really made me feel welcome as my host here this week. So it's been great. We've got a little more about the host school today. Garrett College offers some really outdoorsy degrees. So for those veterans who are accustomed to being in the outdoors and you like that sort of thing, you're going to find some really cool things here. One of the things that they offer is an associate's degree in adventure sports. We've got some great facilities here, including Deep Creek Lake, lots of wildlife everywhere. In fact, I've seen black bears on 2 different occasions here in the last couple of days. Tons of mountain bike trails, the Wisp Ski Resort, Youghiogheny River rafting with Class 5 rapids. And also, this is really cool. This is part of the college here. One of the only man-made whitewater rafting courses in the world. It's nearly a half-mile long course at the top of a mountain, and it serves as a training ground for some of the big-time whitewater athletes and events. I also want to thank my 2 hosts here at Garrett College this week, the VA certifying official Ashley Wilt, as well as Stacy Holler. And Stacy serves as the director of marketing here at Garrett College. They've been great hosts, and they are very interested in recruiting more veterans to come to Garrett College. Okay, today's Virtual Career Expo, we've got some great companies looking to hire you here today. JDog and Geico are our title sponsors. Some of the other companies looking to hire you today include Verizon, Leidos, USAA, Oshkosh. General Dynamics has Mission Systems here, as well as General Dynamics Bath Iron Works. Smith & Nephew is here, 84 Lumber, US Express, Wells Fargo, Allen Myers, and Helmets to Hard Hats. We've also got a few schools at the Virtual Career Expo today, including the Heavy Equipment Colleges of America, Florida Technical University, and the Learning Alliance Corporation. These folks are teaching some really great trades at these schools. And if you haven't tuned into that lately, the skilled trades are in super, super high demand right now. There's some great jobs out there in the trades. Also with us here at the Virtual Career Expo is our good friend, George Duffield. George is over at the Vetrapreneur Franchise Coaching booth. So if you're interested in opening a franchise and you don't know which one or even how to pursue it, and you're looking for a guide to help you through that process, which can be scary, George is your guy, and he does it for free. The services are free to veterans, and he will help walk you through that process as your coach, as your mentor, in a very one-to-one capacity. For those who want to get into franchising, you're going to need a minimum credit score of 680 and at least $10,000 in liquid cash in order to qualify for those franchise opportunities and those franchise coaching services. Finally, there is plenty of career advice over at the GI Jobs booth, as well as the ACP booth. Our partners with American Corporate Partners have been fantastic, and we welcome them here today. In fact, they're in Nana's hometown, or current hometown of New York City, right there in Midtown. Okay, some quick admin for today's Virtual Career Expo. First of all, I'm proud to say that GI Jobs is in our 20th year. I'm very proud of our team who bring their talent and their passion to work every day to deliver on our mission, which is to connect the military community to civilian opportunity. And as good as our team is, we are not perfect. So I want you to know that we are fiercely committed to not just meeting, but to exceeding your expectations. So whether you are an exhibitor or an attendee, please fill out the satisfaction surveys we have at the conclusion of our event. Let us know what we did well, and let us know what we need to do better. I promise you that we value your feedback, and we will turn that feedback into improvement as fast as we can. If you had a good time and you'd like to do a video testimonial, we'd love to hear from you there as well. And we'll make you a rock star in a video format and a chance to win a $100 Amazon gift card. All you've got to do is show up at the GI Jobs booth, talk to Edgar Reynolds, and schedule that. If you can't make it there, or if the line's too long, you can simply email Edgar to schedule that video testimonial, and you can do that at edgar.reynolds, REYNOLDS, at gijobs.com. Last, if you've got any questions during today's keynote or any of the sessions at all, please go ahead and submit those on any of the chat or any of the other venues that we've got for feedback. Okay, on for the reason you are all here today. We've got a corporate rock star here, folks, who is one of our own. Nana Adae is my classmate from the Naval Academy. We are both from the great class of 1991. And we had to say that many, many times during our 4 years at the boat school. And yes, if you can do math, that means we're also now really, really old. In fact, our 30th year reunion in Annapolis is coming up this October. We've got some classmates who have kids who have already graduated from some of the service academies. In fact, my own company mate, Wade McConvey, has a son who graduated from, I dare say, West Point this past May. But we're looking forward to that 30th year reunion. Listen, guys, I think you're going to find Nana to be an incredibly inspiring story. She's I think a great example of someone who came from, the military background, just like we all did. She had a lot of ambition going into that, and a lot of things and a lot of talent going for her, but the military service made her better, like I think it did all of us. And we're really graduates of one of the best training institutions or training schools in the world. We like to say military alumni, as opposed to veterans sometimes. So she's going to be a great example for you. Okay, let me give you a little brief background on Nana. She is the managing director and product owner in the advisor platform transformation group at JP Morgan Chase. She's focused on digital product development for wealth management advisors. She directs technology, investment analytics, and design and research teams in the delivery of capabilities designed to increase advisor efficiency and to drive business growth. Prior to this role, Nana was head of investments for the private bank Chicago team, managing an investment practice overseeing approximately $16 billion in assets. Nana and her team partnered with families to steward their assets and craft generational legacies. In short, she's a fast mover at one of the world's leading financial institutions. Prior to her career in finance, Nana served as a lieutenant in the US Navy, as a crypto officer, leading communication specialists, linguists, and signals analysts. She served as communications department head while stationed in Japan, and served in the Balkan and Mediterranean theaters as a communications evaluator on board the EP-3 aircraft. She studied Arabic at the Defense Language Institute in Monterey and graduated with a bachelor's degree in English and engineering from the US Naval Academy in '91. During her service, she earned the Navy Achievement Medal, Navy Com, and the Air Medal. After leaving the Navy, she earned an MBA from one of the best business schools in the country, Columbia Business School. She lives in New York now. She serves on the board of the Mission Continues, the Rebuild Foundation, and the U.S. Naval Academy Alumni Association and Foundation. Ladies and gentlemen, I give you a great American, Nana Adae.
Thank you so much, Chris. It's great to be here. I appreciate all that you said to intro me to the group. I actually loved what you were talking about with the curriculum there at the college. Just giving people that flexibility. And I think one of the things that I loved about all the things that you talked about was it allows like-minded people to come together. And I think that's one thing that as you transition from military to civilian life is really key, kind of that whole idea of finding your tribe. So anyway, as Chris said, almost 30 years ago, goodness gracious, I graduated from the Naval Academy. And then spent 7 years active duty. And then at that point decided that I wanted to do something in the civilian world. And I will tell you, I did not know where to start, like literally had no idea where to start. And I thought maybe going to some sort of school would help me transition. And I didn't really know what type of program to go to. So I just kind of asked around. And that's one thing I will definitely tell you is like, you know, when you find that tribe of people that are kind of doing what you're doing, make sure you ask a ton of questions. You don't have to do exactly what that person says that they're going to be doing, but the more people you talk to, the more ideas and options that you get. And things like expos are fantastic because it's very efficient, right? You can find out like all sorts of opportunities and different paths. And so once I finally settled on getting an MBA, I thought, okay, this is great. I'm going to go to business school and I'm going to have 2 years to figure out what I want to do. And then that's great. And that's actually not how business school worked, right? Like I wish I had actually talked to people to understand that. The way business school works is pretty much by Thanksgiving of your first year, you're supposed to have a really good idea of what you want to do because you're lobbying by that point to get yourself a summer internship. And hopefully in that summer internship, you can get a full-time offer and then you can get a full-time, then you can go and do that job after you graduate. So that was like my first like eye opener that, okay, just because there's a path set in front of me, it was much more clear in the military to understand like, great, you have this role, these are other options, and then you kind of move from there. Civilian world just doesn't have that same kind of a path. So I got myself on a path and then realized that like the treadmill was actually set to like 8 when I thought I was going to be on like, 2 or 3 to start out with. And when I got to business school, I actually saw a woman who had graduated a year after me from the academy. And I literally looked at her and I was like, how did you know you wanted to be here? I mean, that's when I tell you I didn't really know what I wanted to do when I was getting out. I'm like totally serious. And she said, well, I grew up in Westchester, New York, and a lot of my friends in the neighborhood, their dads worked on Wall Street. So I kind of thought that that's what I wanted to do. Like, my dad was a college professor. My mom was a marketing exec at Xerox. Finance was nothing that was like really ever on my mind, except for some of the things my mom would talk about, like investing penny stocks or, talking about finance just because it was an interest of hers. But I really started as a clean slate. So the only thing I had going into civilian life was the ability to be flexible, to kind of listen, ask questions, and be willing to try new things, because there is really no guide, and there is no cohort, right? That's why you got to find that tribe. So I got through business school, hadn't been to school in so long, right? Had graduated 7 years before, and now we're taking classes like doing discounted cash flows and all of these things that I just was like, I think I want to go out and lead people. I don't know if this is exactly what I want to do, but I realize now that those were definitely the tools that help you think about opportunities in the future. And so any way that you can get exposure to or information about something is actually really time well spent. And then I decided that what I wanted to do was, not as much what everybody else wants to do. And that's kind of the first thing that I would say is important when you're transitioning out of the military is sometimes there are kind of like the bright, shiny jobs that everyone's like, oh, this is the best job. You have to go do this. You have to go do this. And sometimes that's just not your personality. Sometimes it's not really the great skill set. Sometimes it was an awesome job when someone was talking about it 3 or 4 years ago, but it's not an awesome job now just because of technology changes or changes in the economy. And so it really is important when people tell you like, this is a great opportunity, you ask them why, right? And they may say money, and money's great. Money is a good reason that's why we call it work, right? Otherwise it would be volunteerism. But money is not the only thing, right? Money is one of those things that actually doesn't make a bad situation better. If you were in a job that you hate, you kind of think you would do it because you make a lot of money, but the truth is you actually won't last in a job like that. So if the only answer is you can make a lot of money, I would ask some more clarifying questions as to like, okay, so what do you do? Like, what do you get out of it? What do you learn? What could you do in your next job after a job like that, right? And find out like how much expertise that person has about that particular area before you decide that like, yes, that's what I'm actually going to go do. And I think it's actually really helpful too, because again, you get to survey lots of different people who've done lots of different things, and you get to get a better understanding of all of the options that are out there. And it's, when you come out of the military, I think we have a sense of exactly like what's in our particular purview, but we don't always look to other things because you're not necessarily going to switch ratings or move to another community. But the civilian world is absolutely like that, right? And the job that Chris read at the beginning of my bio is completely different than what I'd done for the first 20 years of my career. And so that flexibility is really key. And so once I got into business school and decided that I was going to kind of go down a certain track and kind of figured out what the atmosphere was like, then I realized that it was about like, okay, so how do I get into this place, into these companies, and I don't really know the lay of the land? Like, what is it that I can do to actually get myself up to speed? Well, luckily at Columbia, there was a military group. And so I found some other people who had either a little bit more context, had friends or fellow alum that were like a few steps ahead of us. And those were the types of people that kind of gave me information about like, you know, what to expect, right? This is the way that people might perceive you as a veteran. So like one of the things, you know, that I always tell people is like in the military, I think everybody thinks that we're like super rigid and all we do is follow orders, and that isn't necessarily what you want in a company, right? You want somebody who's flexible, think outside of the box. And I don't think that people realize that in the military, oftentimes we're told we need to do something. We may not have all of the resources set up perfectly. The timing may not be always perfect. And you do have to have a certain amount of creativity to get, you know, groups of people to work together. Yes, we know we have to follow orders and all of that kind of stuff, but I do think that there are skills and ways in which we carry ourselves in the military that are very applicable. And so being able to kind of talk about some of those things a little bit differently, because it's hard to know, it's hard to know how to talk about being a comm eval on an EP3 and how that's going to translate to helping people manage their money. Like, there really is no way to make that direct correlation. But what I can tell you is, because I led teams of people, right, I have a much better understanding and ability to read people and to understand, is the message that I'm giving them landing, right? Like that's super important. You can't just sort of be oblivious when you're in a leadership position as to whether or not people are actually getting the clarity of your message, the intent of your message. Are you holding people accountable, right? There's certain skill sets that you have just because it's matter of course for the way that we do business in the military that are absolutely applicable in other skill sets, right? And truthfully, the fact that the sense of accountability and responsibility that you have as a veteran, like that's paramount. And I will say that when I got out, one of the things that I was like always surprised, a little surprised with, that sometimes people would just be like, oh, well, that's just not my job. Like, I don't do that. And my attitude was always like, oh, okay, well, I got it. That's not in our purview, or we have to work a little bit longer. Like my job was always sort of like mission, my mindset was always mission accomplishment. And I sometimes found that that's not necessarily how people thought around me. And so I think that there are certain aspects of our personality that like translate really well to a lot of environments that you can kind of talk about those things to help transition some of those skill sets that you have, right? It's the way that you are, right? So how you look at problems, right? How you think about problem solving. Things aren't spoon-fed to you in the military, right? You really do have to figure out, like, how do I get from point A to point B? You may have a general plan, but things are going to come up. Those are the types of things that you want to be able to convey to somebody if that job requires some level of innovation or creativity. You want to look at, you know, the types of people that work in these jobs. People, as I started sort of going through my career, people would always come to me and they'd be like, great, tell me about your career path. And like, you know, and after a while I started saying like, you can look at my career path on LinkedIn, right? Like this can't be about me telling you about every single job that I've had. What I think would be more useful for you is for me, if I were to explain to you like what it is I like about these jobs, what it is I think about these skill sets made me successful in these jobs. And the question then to you is, do you recognize yourself in what I'm saying? because that's really the key. Like, I can have a great career and I can have a bunch of fun, but if you don't think the things that I do are actually fun, like, it's not going to work out for you, right? If they're not skill sets that you have, like, it's just not going to work out for you. So be really intentional about your networking. And I don't think I really knew that in the beginning, right? Like, I was sort of meeting people, I was being very nice to people, and people were like, oh, that's great, you know, she's great. But I was probably not as intentional with my networking as I could have been when I first got out, especially as I am much more now. And there's also this like sort of feeling that networking is really about like trying to get something from somebody, and it's not genuine. And that's not really the case. You know, people are willing to spend time with you. They're willing to like answer anything sort of on that really honest level. And so really just kind of understanding what is it that makes that person tick when they're talking to you is the type of thing that I think really will serve you well as you start moving through your career. So anyway, I go to business school, I get out, I get a job at Goldman Sachs, and it was really great to have achieved that, right? Like, I did the summer, I got the offer, and I went, and I thought it was what I wanted to do. And then when I sat at the desk, I just sort of was like, wow, this isn't 100% what I really want to do. And I will tell you that the lesson that I learned is a bit of what I said before. You have to be really careful about the type of opportunity that you go after, that it actually really fits with your personality. And I really should have asked those questions of like, okay, sure, what do you do every day, right? You have a day in the life, you shadow people, all of those things. But like, what do you do like on the fourth day? What do you do 2 weeks after? What do you do after you've done all those things? Like, what is it that excites you about what you're doing? And as much as I liked it conceptually, that particular skill set was not interesting to me. And so after I left Goldman, I was there for less than 2 years. I went and worked at a startup because, as you remember before, I said, you know, I think I actually want to like manage people. I want to sort of drive something, and worked at a startup for a couple of years. And it was a really interesting experience because you're just kind of like down at ground zero. You're starting from the beginning. I was the 8th person there. It was not Google. So, that's why I'm still working. But it was really, really interesting because I got the opportunity to see things that I wouldn't see in a really big company. And I do think that as veterans, and for the amount of agency and autonomy that we are able to exhibit with the amazing things that we do while we're in the military, if you have that sort of entrepreneurial bent, it's kind of exciting to go do a bit of a startup. But I will tell you, it's a bit of a risk. And so I came out of the military probably, and maybe it's more my personality, a bit risk averse, right? Like I like a certain amount of certainty. I like order. That's just kind of the way I work. And one thing I found it coming out and being a civilian was that, all the great opportunities were not at like the great big companies. Sometimes you really had to kind of dig and look. Sometimes it was like a really cool and interesting opportunity that came through networking, right? Like, so like the entrepreneurship, the startup opportunity came from a friend that I knew from business school. And she happened to know somebody who had just left a consulting firm and was working at a company that was in New Haven at the time. I was living in Connecticut. And so just kind of connecting the dots like that. And I could have been very much like, nope, I'm going from one big company to another big company. But I was willing to take a chance. And I have really good friends that I know to this day, but I also learned some really important skill sets. And also sometimes, smaller companies are willing and more able to actually see how flexible and how fungible those skill sets are, right? So that's something to keep in mind as well. Not saying big companies don't, because, JP Morgan is a huge proponent of and hirer of veterans, and we're a large company. So, but sometimes you can find that, right? So just be flexible and be open. So I left and went to the startup, was there for a little bit, and then just kind of actually came back to finance and pivoted a little bit in what I was doing. And then I was like, oh, this is actually the job that I like, right? So there was a business development aspect to the first side of it. But this one was more about like really having expertise in a specific area. And that was actually really exciting. And that's where I feel like I learned a lot about finance and got to understand the industry more, got to understand the players more. But I will say that I probably still skim the surface a little, as far as, was I really being my whole self, like at work, right? Because there's a bit of a persona. You come out as a vet, people know who you are. You've got that background, and that's great. And I probably was a bit, I probably was a little bit, organized and disciplined about the way that I interacted. And I do think that I probably could have shown a bit more of myself. And I have seen this with other vets, as I've worked in organizations where sometimes vets come in and they're a little bit more quiet because we're kind of used to a level of a hierarchy. We're used to some level of order. And organizations really do want to hear what's going on. Like, what are you thinking? Are you about to find the problem that they haven't been able to find and then solve it? And then that leads to something else. And I remember one West Point grad, actually, he was a summer intern. And I said, I think you need to speak up in a couple more areas. You seem like you're hanging back. And he literally was like, well, no, there's a hierarchy and there's a way that things are done. And, that person's more senior, just a summer intern. And I'm just not going to say anything because that's just not the way it works. And I just respectfully disagree with what you're saying. And I was like, okay, so that's not helpful, right? That's not successful. You can't do all the things that we did in the military. And if you actually find somebody who understands what's happening and gives you some coaching, it probably makes sense to just think on it at least. And ultimately, I think he did end up moving to that mindset of understanding that letting people understand more about him would serve him better. And so he did end up getting an offer and coming to work at the organization, which was great. But there is that sort of initial, and I probably spent some period in my career in that initial feeling of okay, I know exactly how I'm supposed to act and how I want to come across. And sometimes that doesn't give people that opportunity to get to know you. But in the situation I just showed you, in over a summer, this person was able to kind of figure it out, get there, and get to a place where people felt confident that they would be a good member of the team. And so then I then kind of continued down that path, got kind of bigger jobs in that path that had a bit more scope to them. I've always been a client-facing person, but I think there's a lot of jobs that are great that are not client-facing. I think everybody wants to be a client-facing person when they come into businesses, and sometimes clients are not nice. Sometimes it's not the most fun job all the time. But I really am someone who is kind of driven by being able to take complex situations and make them simple. And so that excites me. And so if I can explain interest rates or duration to you in a way that actually makes you understand why a certain decision might be beneficial for you and your family and the longevity of your wealth and the achievement of your goals, that's a really fun and cool application. And I wouldn't have been able and wasn't able to talk about those things when I first came out of the military. But by giving myself some patience, at first I didn't have a lot of patience for the things I didn't know. And I was I need to know all this stuff perfectly. But by giving myself enough patience to be in these situations and to understand that they were learning and that they were leading somewhere, I finally got to that place where I was, an expert in a field and, covering clients. And in a private banking situation, what you're doing is you're just advising people on ultimately how it is that they can meet their goals. And different people have different responsibilities on those teams. But for most of my career, I focused on investments. And so I've talked to people about equity and, stocks and bonds and hedge funds and private equity and, all different types of things that they can kind of put together in certain ways so that they can just kind of optimize their wealth and hopefully use that wealth for all the things that they want to use it for, right? Because it's not just there to sit in a bank account. It's there to pay for college, or it's there to start a business one day, or it's there to, build a second home. So, so thoroughly enjoyed that work and worked my way up to, heading up desks where people did that type of work for clients. And so just came back from Chicago. I was so used to moving all the time, just a little aside, right? So used to moving all the time with the military that I realized that after business school, I was ready to move, right? 2 years. And then was at Goldman and moved to another city, another state, and then was like ready to move. It took me a second to like actually get out of the itch of being like, the tours and ready to move. But finally, shook that. But then decided to take a new challenge for work and move to another office in Chicago and lead that team there. And I will tell you, it was really, really interesting to work in a different office. Sorry about that. To plug in my computer. It was really interesting to work into a different office because I had always worked at headquarters, except for when I worked at Goldman out on the West Coast. And it really is important. I think if you care about like the full mission of your business and you have the opportunity to work in different places, just getting to know our clients and my colleagues in the Midwest and to understand that business better, I definitely think it made me better at what I do. And it also increased my network at the firm, which was really important. Like it isn't necessarily just about like how much work and how well you're doing your work and how well you're executing, because I think you're sort of like, great, I'm going to do a great job every day. It really is about like how you're socializing all the things that you are doing, because it's really important sometimes for people to understand that, hey, you're working on this particular project and this is actually interconnected with something that I'm doing, and we're actually going to get a better outcome because I've actually come and told you like what I'm working on. It's not like a level of arrogance of me telling everybody what I'm doing and it's actually seeing a bigger picture and creating a level of synergy. And so by moving to another office, another big office in a big business, I was able to just kind of connect the dots a little bit better. And so that was really exciting. But when I came back, I've been doing this type of work for a really long time. And again, in my effort to kind of like have that North Star of what do I like to do? I like to take complex concepts and really make them simple. And I've always really liked leading and managing people and wanting to be as really as good at that as I can be, and just trying to think of all the other skill sets that I would want to do. Like if I was like a little CEO, like what would I be doing? And I really, at this point in my career, kind of just sat down and said like, okay, great. So I've amassed a level of skills. There's certain things that I don't quite know yet. So what's the turning point? What do I want to do now? And that, believe it or not, led to digital product development, something totally different than investments. But I have a team. It's pretty complex to think about coding and analytical work and doing all the design and the user experience. But we take all of that and we just very simply push it out to the business in a format that helps them grow their business. And that has been super exciting for me to actually, after a long career doing one thing, to pivot and do something totally different. So it's been back and forth, up and down, different, the same, exciting, boring, but ultimately super fulfilling. And I'm actually really excited on where I head to next.
Nana, great stuff. Really, really great stuff. I was captivated when you were talking about the West Pointer, and I was glad he was a West Pointer, not a Navy guy or woman. No, the cultural fit, right? That is so important, and it's so hard. And I don't think we realize it when we're in the service, how sort of, I don't know what the right words are, rigid, binary, things are very, very clear cut. They're very binary, right? And sometimes that's because the communication needs to be, because people's lives are in jeopardy, right? When you're in aviation, you've got to be really clear and very direct.
Yeah.
But corporate America is this, the business world, the private sector is this constantly evolving being that is multifaceted with so many different fronts. And so you're talking about socializing something within an organization. It's really interesting stuff. And you talk about, we've seen so many veterans who have really, I think, struggled with that, figuring out how are they supposed to act, right? And I think a lot of times they'll take the the first path that they may take is to sort of resist that new culture, which can be really, counter to their career development in the private sector. So yeah, that was really captivating to see, and to hear kind of your insight on that. A lot of those differences do tend to be the cultural things. It's not, hey, how do my skills necessarily translate? That's kind of, we'll figure that one out. But it's the human stuff. It's the emotional stuff that tends to be really tough. But yeah, no, good stuff. One of the other things I think we talk a lot about the differences in the cultures. One of them is simply the age. So, when you're the age of you and I, and you're in the military, you're an artifact, right? We're not necessarily young in corporate America anymore, but we're not old either, right? Your average person working out in the private sector is probably in their early 40s.
Right. Yeah.
It's different. And, even in the other difference that we see a lot is when in the private sector, people kind of go home to their families and their personal friend networks and stuff like that when they leave the job. In the military, that's, your work family is kind of like your family also.
Yeah. Yeah. Especially when you're overseas. My overseas duty stations, we were so much more close knit because we were everything that we had. So we would go out, we would work together, all the same thing. And I came off of an overseas tour to come back to go to business school. And so it really, like, I was like the loneliest woman in New York City, because you're just like, wait, where, like, there's so many people, but where are my people? Right. So that's actually really, that's very true. Very, very true.
Some of the soft landing, we call them soft landing cultures, tend to be in going to work for the government, right? Or going to work in the defense industry where you're familiar, and they may have, cultures that are more aligned maybe with the military, but others, like finance and Wall Street and those types of things, it's probably not. So I don't know, any other insights that you might give on veterans who are, looking at that and just, dealing with some of the mental struggles, right, with that transition and fitting in.
Yeah, no, it's very real. And I think you brought up a good point about, sometimes people just resisting it or avoiding it. Like, that's not the best way to do it. If there generally should be other veterans in that organization, and there's probably a group, super, super helpful to find them, because they're the people who can actually unlock the culture, because there may be pieces of the culture that you're not actually that interested in participating in. And they can actually tell you, actually, it's all right not to participate in that part, but you can't just reject all of it. Like, here's the other things that the culture stands for, and this is what you can sort of like embrace. And sometimes it is just understanding that, hey, you've run into a person or a particular group that isn't the cultural fit for you. But, oh, by the way, we're looking for people in our department and it's totally different, right? And so you really do have to, like, get outside of yourself to make sure that you truly understand the culture. And if the culture is a challenge, those people are resources that can help you actually navigate it better. And then ultimately, if the culture is really a challenge, after you've taken a really hard look that it's like, I just don't want to change, but it really is a challenge, then it's clearly another opportunity.
Yeah, no, good stuff. The career pathing too. The career pathing is so much different, especially, well, I guess both on the officer and the enlisted side. In the military, it's test in advance, it's time and grade. Many of those things, at least at the early stages of your military career, are simply a function of that. And in the private sector, it's very, very different. You don't have a detailer, right? There's no detail telling you what you're going to
These are your options.
Yeah.
Do you want to go to Puerto Rico? Do you want to go to Scotland? Like, what are your choices? And that's why I think it's so important to talk to people, because you don't actually know what the interesting fields are. I often say to people, if you read the Wall Street Journal, oftentimes you'll see that they define things, right? They'll talk about the inverse relationship between interest rates and prices. And I always wonder, I was like, but everybody knows that. And the key is, even on Wall Street, everyone doesn't know that, because everyone has like specialized jobs. And so when they write articles, they always explain what something is. And so you have to make sure that you sort of have a wide net of people that you can talk to, because you are now your own detailer. and you are the one who's like, oh, I've built up a certain skill set. I talked to this person and they're like, oh, did you know that this is an opportunity now that you are able to do X, Y, Z? So, and then it just leads to things that are a bit more fulfilling rather than waiting for those opportunities to kind of come in lockstep, because as Chris says, the corporate world isn't like that.
Yeah, and then in your position in finance investing, you see, the trends of the industries and that are growing. You see the trends in occupations, and those are ever changing. I mean, technology is constantly disrupting industries and occupations. What advice would you give? Maybe are there some industries or some occupations that come to mind that you think are going to be in much higher demand in the future? Sitting in the unique position you are, kind of looking at these kind of things every day, right? At sort of what people are going to invest in, where money's flowing, right? Where capital and resources are flowing. What advice would you give to veterans in that regard?
Yeah, I would say technology, healthcare are two of the industries that kind of come to mind right away. And I think anecdotally, we can all think of reasons like why that would be true. And very specifically, like the example I used before, how bifurcated finance is, it's the same way in all of those industries. So you may be someone who actually has a heart for marketing. You can find that in healthcare, right? You can find that in technology. So by no means do you have to write code or actually be a practitioner of medicine to work in healthcare. There's a lot of different facets that work in each of those areas. But inside of even technology, there's so much stuff around data, AI, machine learning. And yes, there's all sorts of technical things, but it's on some level, it's still in its infancy as to where the applications for those types of technologies can go. So you really can kind of still feel like you can get in on the ground level in certain pieces of technology. So those would be my two top industries as to where money's definitely flowing.
Yeah, no, it's good insight. Thank you. Well, folks, we're going to wrap up here. She may be on Fortune or Forbes soon, but she was here first. GI Jobs, cover model, Nana Adae. What an inspiration. My classmate, super proud of you and everything that you've accomplished. And we certainly appreciate your wise words today. So that's a wrap. We hope everybody enjoys the Virtual Career Expo today. Like I said, get out there and talk to as many companies as you possibly can. Ask lots of questions, figure out your next path to civilian opportunity. That's all we've got. Enjoy it all. Thanks again, Nana, for being with us today. Take care.
Thank you for the invitation.
You got it.